Well, hi, thanks, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to connect, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy days to get together. We have an exciting and very full agenda for you this afternoon, so I will jump right in. Tony, you want to go ahead and share your screen?
Sure. Let me go from the beginning here, and should be loading here. Just give me 1 second. Hopefully. Are you all seeing that yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Screen 2, maybe.
There we go.
All right, perfect.
Okay. Thanks, Tony. Well, let's go ahead and advance on through. So we have a few questions that can be answered. The soapbox information is presented there. Just in terms of an agenda today, I'll cover some announcements. I'm going to mostly related to COVID and some things that have happened over the past week. I'll introduce you to Dr. Woods Tucker if you haven't had a chance to work or connect with him yet. He's going to cover some information around diversity, equity, and inclusion a little later on in the conversation with us. I'll cover new staff and the SEA awards. Tony's going to cover communications. We have folks here from the Kentucky Employee Charitable Children's Campaign. Associate Commissioner Robin Kinney's on to talk about budget. As I mentioned, Thomas Woods Tucker on to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. And then we'll finish up with just some reflections from me, do Q&A, and then look ahead to some important dates over the next couple of months. So with that, let's go ahead and advance, Tony. This is just a note that anyone that can't attend, we appreciate the contributions that you make to students all over Kentucky every day. And also you can access all of this information archived on SharePoint. Okay, keep on going, Tony. Thanks so much. So the big news last week was that Governor Beshear suspended all in-person instruction for Kentucky schools beginning today. We have two models that are operating going forward. Our elementary schools can open for in-person instruction beginning December 7th, so long as the school and the community that they're in is not in the red zone. And they follow the Healthy at School guidance document. And then middle and high schools can also come back starting January 4th. The governor intentionally didn't make any decisions about past January 4th. He really wanted to look at the data and information at that point and make a decision then. I think we're all hopeful that folks will take the steps that they need to get this virus under control over the next few weeks. We've done it before. We did it this past spring with some changes in behavior and mobility. They really flattened that curve and limited the spread of the virus. If that isn't effective, we'll have to take stock again in January and decide what the best course forward is at that point. And of course, there's a lot that we don't know. There are no easy decisions when it comes to making these calls or continuing forward in person was a difficult proposition just because it meant all of the virus mitigation strategies that schools have in place. There's a tremendous amount of pressure being put on them because of the rising community spread numbers. And we have large scale numbers of staff and students who are having to quarantine. And of course, that's disruptive to schools as they work to navigate that. The executive order does allow for targeted in-person services to continue. We've issued guidance around that. That doesn't mean everybody comes back to school. It's smaller groups for a limited amount of time for targeted services. So there is more information that KDE has provided around that. And we see several districts taking advantage of that opportunity. So that's good that they're able to continue those targeted supports for students that are in need and in those small groups. Also exempted from the governor's executive order are early childhood, pre-K, and child care services. So those can continue again with the Healthy at School practices that have been distributed previously. So there's sort of an update on COVID. I trust that all of you are staying safe. We've got seen alarming increases in the number of cases, positivity hospitalizations, death rates. We want to all make sure that our families and everybody that's connected with Kentucky Department of Education, we're all safe and we don't have those illnesses or loss of life that comes in contact with our family. And we have some control over that. Certainly there are people who will contract this virus through no fault of their own, but we also can take steps to keep ourselves as safe as possible. And those are well-known, reasonable steps that we all can and should be taking. Next slide, please, Tony. Introduce you to Dr. Thomas Woods Tucker. He's been working with us for a couple of weeks now, a deputy commissioner and serving as the commissioner over the Office of Teaching and Learning, and our chief equity officer. I won't steal a lot of Thomas's thunder because I know he's visiting with you a little later today to work on equity and inclusion work, following up on some of the work that we've done with Dr. Cleveland and building upon that. So we'll hold off on introducing Dr. Woods Tucker more formally because I know he's got some time on the agenda. Next slide, please, Tony. So we new KDE staff. We have, of course, Dr. Woods Tucker, as I mentioned, coming on. We also have Lisa Oakes in the Office of Career and Technical Education. Welcome, Lisa. We look forward to meeting you and getting to work with you. Here started on November 16th, Hillary Morton joined the Office of Education and Technology in School Data Services. Welcome, Hillary. We're glad to have you on. And in the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, Sarah McIntosh is on with student engagement and support. So welcome all new KDE staff. We look forward to getting the chance to meet you in person and work with you more closely in the days and years ahead. And now we have the Strategic Excellence and Achievement Award. So there are 3 different categories of these. One is student success, the second is strategic partnership, and third is operational excellence. And we have 3 very deserving award winners for this month. So let's see who those are. Okay, this first Student Success Award is presented to, drum roll please, Steve Kissinger. Congratulations, Steve, for your work on really supporting districts through this whole transition to NTI. We know that this is a program that was in place before the pandemic hit, and it's certainly something that's taken off since then. So, Steve, we're appreciative of all of your work up to that point to have this program ready to go, have all of the thinking done around it so that it was an opportunity that we could activate when we needed to and shift everybody into remote learning. And of course, that's happening again at a large scale today. So congratulations, Steve. And the second, around strategic partnerships, this award is presented to, drum roll please, Shara Savage. Shara, congratulations. Shara did a lot of work with districts around the ACT. We know that there was a tremendous amount of disruption around testing in the spring, but we still had several thousand students in Kentucky that wanted to take the ACT. They were applying for a school that was still requiring it, and so Shara had to do a lot of work with districts and with students and with ACT to make that assessment happen, and that's still ongoing right now. So Shara, thank you for that work in partnership with districts and with ACT to make that opportunity available for our students. And finally, for operational excellence, this award goes to Danielle Harris in the communications office. Danielle, congratulations. We were all so proud of the work around the Teacher of the Year ceremony, even though it had to happen remotely and electronically. It was really an incredibly well-run production. I was super proud of it, and I know that all the participants were blown away and overwhelmed at it as well. So Danielle, we appreciate all of the work that you put in for that. Okay, and Tony, we'll turn things over to you for a little communications update.
Great, thank you. So really the only communications update that I have for you all is I want to basically share a video that we produced last week. It is 3 minutes. So I'm gonna have to unshare and then share my screen so that, and I'm not gonna share my video so that, Commissioner Class received an email about 3 weeks ago from a student that was looking to get in touch with a teacher that she had about 40 years ago. I think a few of you may have seen the story that we sent out via communications through press release. The story has now been featured in People magazine. I've been in touch with CBS this morning. But really, this has been a great effort by the Department of Education to highlight the important work of our teachers. So I wanted to share with you a reminder of our why and the work that we do at the Kentucky Department of Education. So I'm going to reshare my screen, and hopefully it will have volume, because I've learned a lot over the time of, let's see here. I have to present, and okay. Please let me know if you cannot hear. There's no audio at the beginning, or there is audio, sorry. Sorry.
How are you all? Oh my goodness gracious. How are you?
Good.
Oh my.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
gonna have some tears.
Me too. So this is the letter that I wrote to Kentucky Department of Education trying to find you, to Dr. Glass. Today I've gone on to graduate from Transylvania University and Harvard Law School. I'm a co-head of the International Practice to Speech Practice and member of the executive committee of a national law firm based in Washington, D.C. called Williams & Connolly. I spend substantial pro bono work helping refugees gain asylum in the U.S. I mention this only to underscore the point that I often wonder whether this career would have been possible if I had not had someone spend her extra time to help me learn English and ensure that I did not fall behind or through the cracks. I would very much love to say thank you, and that my life very likely wouldn't have been possible without you. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
I know that you say it's what you had to do, but you did it on your own time, and I don't know, I'm like shaking a little. I don't know where I would be, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for changing my life.
I remember this.
Yeah?
Uh-huh. I want to give you something first. I had been looking for something to give you when you got here. Now I want you to read this part. Yes.
Today, more than 130 million girls are denied an education. This story begins with one of these girls. It also begins with one book. The girl reads, and the world opens up to her. She discovers other places, other lives, and other possibilities. Thrust into a rich, vibrant world of language and ideas, the girl's imagination takes flight. Brimming with inspiration, the girl must share her story with others and bring other girls from darkness into light. With poetic text by best-selling author Andrea Betty and breathtaking illustrations by Dao Fumaruk, one girl celebrates the dramatic impact of education on a child's life and the power that even the youngest of us have to break this cycle, empower ourselves, and inspire others.
Isn't that something?
I think it made a big difference in my life that one of the first interactions I had was with someone volunteering and giving their time, and sort of knowing that, sort of just absorbing that that's how one should behave, I think has made a big impact on how I try to help others and how I sort of mentally think about the world. So it's not just the teaching English, I think it's the teaching that we should all help each other and we should do what we can for each other, I think was a really important sort of lesson too.
So this was just the shorter version of the story that was produced by Marvin Young. Many of you all know Marvin. He's kind of our honorary KDE photographer and now esteemed videographer. I told him the stage has been set, so he's going to be doing a lot more work for us. And then Megan, of course, in OTE did a great job with helping put it all together. But this is the kind of work that we are going to be doing more work about. So as you everyone in Team KDE finds stories and examples of things like this that we can highlight what our teachers and our schools do each and every day, please let me know and let our communications office know, because we want to do this kind of work. And it all started off with an email to Dr. Glass. And with that,
Tony,
that's my report.
And Tony, thanks also to you for the work that you did on this.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I know that I got this. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of echo. I got this email and forwarded it on to you and asked, what could you do with this? And you did something pretty amazing. So great work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Our next is going to be Chastity and Kevin.
Thanks, Tony. My name is Chastity Kittrell, and this year I'm leading KDE with the KECC campaign. Fundraising is looking a little different for us this year, given our situation. Therefore, I'm encouraging everyone, if you haven't done so already, to give through payroll deduction. Now more than ever, our communities and families need our help. You can do that by simply logging on to Chris and selecting to either do a monthly payroll deduction of your choice or a one-time pledge, however you feel led. Did you know that if everyone donated just $2 a pay period, that would raise $1.4 million? So every little bit helps. And today I have Kevin Middleton from KECC here to speak to us more about how we can help and what our donations can provide for others. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you all for having me here. Again, my name is Kevin Middleton, and I'm president for United Way of Kentucky, and I'm also the administrator for the Kentucky Employees Charitable Campaign. And I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. Could we go back one slide? Thank you. The mission of the KECC is to improve lives and to strengthen Kentucky communities by investing in basic needs, family stability, education, and health for every Kentuckian. A lot of times we get this question, why should I give? Why should you give? It's simple. Real improvement to Kentucky's problems in the areas of basic needs, family stability, education, and health can't happen unless people take a stand, right? Every Kentuckian needs these core foundations to succeed. Most importantly, we ask that you consider giving because your community needs you. Even before this pandemic, individuals and families across the Commonwealth were struggling to get by. We've seen that, right? Since March, families have been turning to charities more now than ever. And so now more than ever, if you can't afford to make a small contribution, it's understood. Families are going through hard times, but if you can, it can make a big difference in helping your fellow Kentuckians help get through this moment, right? With the basic needs and particularly under these circumstances, to help with situations that are out of the control, like illness and injury that don't stop because of the pandemic, right? So KCC is an easy way for you to be a part of the solution. Now, that's whether you give back via payroll deduction or a one-time gift to one of the 4 areas of your choice. You can give to your cause through this campaign. So slide, please. Making the choice to give through KECC is easy. You can give again to one of these 4 foundations that every Kentuckian needs to thrive. You can give health to support ending cancer, to find the cure, right? To help with opioid support, to help with addiction treatment, to help seniors in their time of need at this time, to help infants and mothers get through the early months of pregnancy and birth, to help with children with special needs. You can give to education to support early childhood learning. You can help support children from K to 12. You can help support public school programming, higher education, and workforce development. You can give basic needs to support hunger relief, homelessness, financial assistance for families at this time, especially around things like utilities assistance and eviction assistance, right? 211 services, information referral services, and poverty, especially in hard-hit areas like Appalachia and throughout the state. You can give family stability, right? To support foster youth, you can support financial literacy programs, you can support tax services, criminal justice services, child abuse, and domestic abuse services. Can you go to the next slide for me? Maybe you have a favorite charity that you've been giving to for years. The KDCC charities that are part of this campaign, you can see them listed here: American Cancer Society, Community Health Charities, COSAR Charities, etc. They undergo rigorous scrutiny by the Personnel Cabinet and have been vetted through stringent guidelines, right? They are well managed, they're accountable, they help people right here in the Commonwealth. These federations represent nearly 1,000 charitable programs. And when you learn more at kecc.org, you'll find that they touch almost all of our lives. Most importantly, 100% of collected donations goes directly to help others when you give to one of the impact areas or to the partner charities. You can learn more about their work again on kecc.org. There's a link called Giving Guide. I encourage you to take a look at it. But before we go any further, I just want to tell you my KCC story. You see, KCC has a real impact, and I can tell you that from experience. In 2009, my son Linus was born, and at 20 weeks of pregnancy, we found out that Linus had a heart defect and that he would need surgery very soon after birth if he would survive. And when he was born, we learned that Linus also had Down syndrome, and that heart defects of this nature are somewhat common for kids with Down syndrome. But we had work to do. Linus needed to weigh at least 11 pounds before he would be deemed healthy enough to go through the surgery. And unfortunately, he never got there. At 10.5 pounds and 6 months old, Linus was admitted to COSAR Children's Hospital, which is now Norton Children's in downtown Louisville, because it couldn't wait any longer. Linus had open heart surgery to create a valve and to repair a hole in his heart. And that in itself is a miracle, right? Because if you think about a baby who weighs 6 pounds, their heart's only about this big. And to open it up and create a valve and repair a hole and expect to put it all back together and expect it to pump is a remarkable thing in itself, right? And Linus did great. In fact, he was doing so well, the very next day they decided they would take out the breathing tube because he seemed so strong. But immediately upon doing so, Linus went into cardiac arrest. And in that little room, that pediatric intensive care unit cell, it went from having 2 nurses to a team of about 20 coming in and out of that room. And for 20 minutes, that team, and one person in particular who I can still envision to this day, fought to keep my little 6-month-old baby alive. And they did. They saved my son. And I still get emotional thinking about all of it. But one additional memory stands out for me. And that's because I walked out of that room, that intensive care unit, in fact, when we were checking out after they saved my son a few days later, and we were headed home. And I noticed there was this plaque on the wall right next to me as I walked out of that unit, and it said, "This unit is donated by the WHAS Crusade for Children." The Pediatric Intensive Care Unit was created because of funding from the WHAS Crusade for Children. And then I walked downstairs that day, and in the lobby there was a massive sign that talked about all the charities that supported, all the individuals that supported the creation of COSAR Children's Hospital at the time. And United Way was on there, and Community Health Charities was on there, and COSAR Charities was on there, and again, WHAS Crusade. All of these agencies had an impact on saving my son's life. And that's why I fight so hard for this. That's why it's so important to me. Can you please go to the next slide? In the end, it's your cause, right? It's your choice. You have organizations that you're passionate about, that you care about, that you give to year after year. You can give to any or all of the 4 critical areas we talked about earlier. You can give to any of the 501c3 nonprofits that are supported through this campaign, the KECC charities, or you can give to the 501c3 nonprofit organization of your choice. That's any 501c3 in the entire nation. You can give to your church, you can give to your volunteer fire department, you can give to veterans foundations, education foundations. You can give to any 501c3 of your choice. It's your choice with KECC. Electronic pledging, as Chastity mentioned, is available via payroll deduction and employee self-service. The portal in Chris, for those needing a paper form, a download link is provided in the self-service portal. You can also print one at kecc.org. Most people like to give via payroll deduction. It's easy. It lets you spread your gift over the course of a whole year. For example, $10 a pay period is just a $240 annual gift, and that can make a huge, huge difference. One-time contributions can also be made at kecc.org. You can log in there. You can see there's a button there, give a one-time or monthly gift via credit card, ACH, or PayPal. You can also print a form there and attach your donation and send it in. Of course, checks should be made payable to KECC. Can you go to the next slide for me? In short, to wrap this up, now more than ever, we're asking you to make the choice to give if you can. We know that times are hard. We know that everyone is facing a difficult moment, especially under these circumstances when we're all facing such a serious issue as this pandemic, and we're concerned about our family members and our own well-being. Whether you choose to give to one of the 4 foundations, whether you give to the KECC charities, or if you log in and you give to the charity of choice, we are asking you, please consider giving through KECC. And I thank you very much for having me today.
Thanks, Kevin. I just want to say thank you to all of those who have already signed up or donated either through Chris or through Smiles for KECC, which is our virtual 5K fundraiser. But please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions regarding any of this. And I hope you all have a fun and safe, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you all for joining us.
Okay, now we'll turn things over to Robin Kinney to give us a little update on the budget. Some of you may have heard some of this if you were in on the conversations with the commissioner that we had a couple of weeks ago. But we also knew that this meeting had a broader audience, more people tune in. And so Robin, come on and tell us the latest on the budget news for this year.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today. And I'm going to continue our pattern of good news. We've just had 2 really good news presentations, and here's the next one. I know that we had talked earlier this summer, early fall, about the Department of Education, like many other state agencies, being asked to prepare a budget reduction plan. And we prepared an 8% budget reduction plan that would have really impacted both the Department of Education and our local school districts. And we have recently, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, learned that we are not going to have to implement that budget reduction plan. So that's very, very good news. And that has occurred as a result of a couple of things. The Office of the State Budget Director has, as they always do, have been monitoring revenues and receipts of the Commonwealth, and the first quarter came in stronger than they first anticipated. And so they've taken the news to all of our executive branch agencies that we will not have to do a budget reduction plan at this time. The other thing that, of course, we're working on, it's an unusual time for budgets because the Commonwealth only passed a 1-year fiscal budget. The budget that we are now operating under was passed by the General Assembly. And now it's time for the General Assembly to return in January, and they will be working on another 1-year budget for the Commonwealth as a whole. As part of that, we will continue to advocate on behalf KDE, the agency, and also all of our local school districts for adequate funding. So if you'll stay tuned for that, and there may be times during the session that we'll need to reach out and collect information from you, as we do sometimes when we are working on the budget, and really appreciate the efforts of all the staff here that respond to us timely when we're in a busy legislative session. So really good news. Just wanted to make sure that everyone in the department was aware of that. And again, something to be thankful for in this Thanksgiving season. Thank you, and that's all I have to share.
Okay, thanks, Robin. Keep the good news coming. And now we'll turn things over to Thomas Woods Tucker. Thomas, are you on?
Yes, sir, I am on.
Okay, take it right away, sir.
Okay. Tony, would you be so kind to advance the, okay, you've already advanced the slide. When we start to look at our goals and our purpose relative to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want to make mention of a couple things here. Kentucky schools should be safe havens where all students and staff, regardless of their race, color, religion, gender orientation, gender expression, zip code, national origin, or ability, should feel safe and respected in every classroom across the Commonwealth. In my opinion, that's not only the moral or right thing to do, it's also important for America's democracy. The second item, as educators, Team KDE members, we need to identify and eliminate the underlying drivers within our school systems that perpetuate inequity. And I really believe that's the most important work we need to do. It's to work as a team, work with our local school districts in identifying and helping them to identify those drivers and those roadblocks that perpetuate inequities amongst our students. Because if we don't do that, it's going to be nearly impossible to provide opportunities and advancements for each of our students here in the Commonwealth. Then, of course, KDE wants to support and assist all school entities in their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And this is kind of like where I need your help and feedback, because I know that we are asked from time to time to provide assistance. And I really believe that's one of our key jobs, is to provide assistance to our school districts, our colleagues in our local school districts, and even in higher ed as well. But how do we marshal the resources that we have, the limited people and financial resources we have here at KDE to serve our colleagues? And it's really difficult, or it's just not part of what I have done. If someone contacts me, if one of our colleagues were to contact me and ask for assistance. In fact, in my short few weeks here, I've reached out to 4 of our superintendents, and I'm helping one with some critical conversations around equity and around anti-racism. But again, I will be leaning heavily on you all in terms of how we can marshal our resources to help some of the initiatives that are happening at the local level. Next slide, please. I've had the pleasure since arriving on November 2nd to do a quick scan of what I see that's happening. And it's not just anecdotal things. It's come from conversations with people. I've read some research, and I've read some of the work that's already happened here in the Commonwealth. And I'm going to brag about it a little later, because I really think that we're off to a great start to address some of these issues in terms of making the playing field more equitable. And secondly, I didn't want to come here thinking that we did not have any programs in place. We do. As I said, I'll brag about some things that I've already seen, or say that the Commonwealth has figured all of this out regarding, racial tensions, bipartisan politics, and so forth. But there has to be an acknowledgement that our teachers, our principals, and support staff, and our superintendents and boards of education, I might add, are facing some of the most difficult challenges in the nearly 400-year history of public education. And again, all these things are heightened by some of the things that we've talked about relative to education at the national level, state, and local levels as well. But I think what undergirds all of this is taking care of our social and emotional needs. I've already heard from staff members and heard from students. I had the pleasure before starting here officially to sit in on Commissioner Glass's Student Advisory Committee. And folks, our students and staff members, they're afraid. They're afraid of the unknown, and they need support. And so how do we continue to provide the support that our colleagues and our students most desperately need? And in talking with some of our colleagues, I think we need to do a better job of utilizing some of the resources that are right in our State Department of Education and in our buildings. Our counselors, school psychologists, and social workers are huge, passionate supporters in this area, and also helping our colleagues do a better job of utilizing their community resources. So I think that's going to be important as well. And I do know that some communities have less resources than others, but really taking a deep dive and taking a quick look at what community resources that are available. And then the third thing is that acknowledgement that diversity, equity, and inclusion and social emotional learning are drivers within our curriculum. And I am extremely fortunate to work here at KDE, but also work in particular with the very talented people in teaching and learning. You're going to hear later on today as we present to our board chairs our curriculum renewal and an introduction, I should say, to new curriculum like world history standards and so forth. We can take advantage of that, and I want to talk a little bit about how we can take advantage of that. We can now look at curriculum through a critical lens, through equity. And so when Jason blessed me with this outstanding opportunity to come here, I felt really, really excited to really change curriculum and help colleagues look at curriculum through a lens of equity. Because if you really want to raise achievement, our students have to have their voices heard in the curriculum. Our students have to be active participants. So how do they become active participants? One, they need to see themselves in the curriculum. They need to see people who look like them. They also need to see people who come from backgrounds similar to theirs. And also that gets to the work that we were doing here at KDE and really across the entire Commonwealth. And that is to help bring in a more diverse workforce. So all of this goes hand in hand, and I'm excited to be a part of that work, the equity part and the curriculum part. I come here as a previous, years ago, as a previous director of curriculum, and now to have an opportunity to have an impact at the state level. I mean, it's exciting for me. Then also, one of the things that I really wrestled with, I mean, throughout my 31-year career, is that understanding that there has to be an awareness that societal issues that impact our communities, that impact our cities, also impact our schools. Our students bring those things to school with them every day. And we have tremendous teachers. We've just recognized some outstanding teachers, the Teacher of the Year. Later on today, we're going to recognize Kentucky's Superintendent of the Year. These folks and our support staff, these folks are heroes. But even with the greatest educators, and we have great educators here, our students bring some of those issues to school, and how do we begin to address those issues? And I really believe our success in addressing these issues is directly related to our ability to collaborate and work together as a community. And I'll also add, as I said earlier, marshaling in some of those resources, community resources that we have traditionally not utilized. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about KDE's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Many of you are already aware of this, and it certainly has been something over the last several weeks that I've been bragging about to my colleagues across the country. As you know, through KDE's strategic plan, and we're going to talk a little bit about our strategic plan tonight when we have our meet with the board chairs with the Kentucky Board of Education. The four priorities are equity, achievement, collaboration, again, getting back to collaboration, and integrity. And that's huge because many times we write down these strategic initiatives and there's very little follow-up. And so I'm extremely happy not only that equity is leading as one of our leading priorities, but also we're having follow-up and we're measuring the outcomes of these initiatives. So excited about that. And also, as you know, in July, the Kentucky Board of Education affirmed its commitment to racial equity and racial justice in all schools in a resolution. I mean, that is huge. I had the pleasure of last week, and I think week before last, and Mickey, you can help me out. We joined in on a discussion with the CCSSO, and folks, I'm trying to work out all these acronyms. It's actually CCSSO, SSO IMPD. It's the professional development arm of CCSO. And we talked about creating an equity and inclusion toolkit. And CCSO is a collaboration, I think, among 7 or 8 states working on this. So we're not in this alone. And so we have that going on. I also was happy to take part last week, to actively take part last week in a discussion with the Northern Kentucky Education Council. They're still working on these things here. And so there seems to be here in the Commonwealth a desire for educators to diverse equity and assure equality in helping to meet the needs of all of our kids. And there seems to be a desire here, again, I can brag about this, that every student deserves equitable access to an excellent educator, to excellent opportunities, so that they are prepared for success after school. And educators, schools, and districts must commit to listening to those seeking to be heard. Again, getting back to those critical conversations, and ensuring that young people of color feel valued and safe in school and the community. And I want to go back to that because many local boards of education and state boards of education are not bold to make those statements. They're certainly not bold in terms of putting this commitment in the form of a resolution. And so again, I'm extremely happy to be in a place that is committed to equity, to justice, and so forth for all students, regardless of their zip code and regardless of what they look like. And again, we have folks right here in Frankfort. Superintendent Barber right here in Frankfort is leading some of the work with some people that many of you have worked with, whether it's Dr. Thompson or Dr. Cleveland. And we're going to hear more from Dr. Cleveland come January, and he's going to continue to help us here at KDE with some of this training as well. Okay, next slide. Conversation about racial trauma and implicit bias are needed across Kentucky, regardless of the makeup of our schools, whether the school is majority minority or majority students. We need to continue to have those conversations. And our districts and communities need to have these conversations to address emotional and traumatic consequences of all students. When we look at this pandemic and we look at what is happening in our society, all of our students are at risk. Now, obviously, some of them are more at risk than others, but all of our students are at risk, and we need to continue those conversations. And again, looking at some of the really talented people here, had an opportunity to spend some time with Dr. Sweeney and our counselors, and all of our districts are working hard to address issues of implicit bias and racial trauma that's happening in our schools. And so, again, I'm really enthused to have that commitment. Then we get to the question about, how can we have these conversations? How can we facilitate these conversations about race-based stress and trauma? Back in June, I was happy to find out that the Kentucky Department of Education's cross-agency trauma and resilience team, in partnership with the Kentucky Department for Behavioral Health and Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities, put together a pamphlet on how to begin to have those conversations. I've already shared that document out. In fact, there's a link right there for you. If you're not familiar with the document, please take a look at it. It has some great suggestions about starting the conversation in addressing stress and trauma. And then again, we know it's important that we need to recruit, develop, and retain an effective and diverse, culturally competent educator workforce, because it is truly the success in the development of our students and helping them to become global members of society. research and personal experience both tell us that next to parents, the most important factor relative to the outcome or the success of our students is having a highly effective teacher, then also having a highly effective principal. And so that's an effort we're going to continue to fight for. And I'm happy with some of the efforts that we're continuing to fight. And we're going to continue to try to provide scholarships and try to continue to grow our own. Again, very important efforts to develop a workforce here, a culturally diverse workforce for our students. Yeah, Tony, how am I doing with time? Now, I can go on and on with this, but we're doing okay with time?
Yes, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, you're doing okay.
Okay, because I want to now, you all have heard from me for the last 10 minutes or so. I want us to have a conversation a little bit about how do we begin to have a courageous conversation, about, next slide, please. A courageous conversation about race, a courageous conversation about identity. As many of you know, Breonna Taylor was killed back in March, on March 13th, in Louisville, and it's has really her death and what has surrounded her death has really struck a chord, and rightfully so, as we began to look at racism, anti-racism, and having courageous conversations about things like that. ABC News has run or is running a 5-part series on Breonna Taylor. And for the first time ever in the history of the Oprah magazine, Oprah has Breonna Taylor on the cover for the very first time. And then also, it's important that we are prepared for any potential fallout that may happen as a second grand jury comes about. So here's a question that I would like for us to think about and put some of your questions in your chat box, or just feel free to unmute yourself. Let's think about, in what ways does your identity inform you as an educator? And while you're doing that, I'm going to have the pleasure in a couple weeks of raising that same question to Commissioner Glass's Teacher Advisory Committee. They asked me to craft a guiding question in my discussion with them, and that's the lead-off question. So in what ways does your identity inform you as an educator, or has informed you as an educator?
And also for our teammates that are listening in on the YouTube link, and you're not on Teams, you can either send me an email and I can send you the link via Teams, or you can go via the Soapbox, and I'll be more than happy to help moderate that.
Thank you, Tony. And then speaking of Oprah, here's a quote on the magazine: "If you turn a blind eye to racism, you become an accomplice to it." If you turn a blind eye to racism, you become an accomplice to it. We're going to go ahead and advance to the next slide. And again, I want to jump in. We still have some little time left. Let's talk about this. Let's talk a little bit about your identity. And in starting, while some of you are still thinking, in starting these conversations, and these conversations could include any discussion about ways that injustice affects our lives and our society. It may not have impacted your life, but how have you seen injustice impact someone else's life? Maybe even impacted their this person's life and not impacted yours?
Thomas, I'll jump in
Sure,
to kind of
sure.
get things started. I think I became aware of the some of the identity and how that's related to both my successes and where I've been limited as an educator and as a professional, being from Kentucky and growing up in Kentucky and then working out of state for many years. You get all kinds of stereotypes that people put on you for being a Kentuckian. And you grew up in Arkansas, you may get
Right.
the same sort of regional stereotypes. And then just the fact that I worked in Eastern Kentucky for some part of my life, people had all kinds of stereotypes that they applied to that, and I still hear that today. It's those communities, those schools, and this sort of otherness that people put on that. But also, there's this sort of privilege walk or equity walk where you have people stand up and you take a step forward if your parents were married, or you take another step up if your mother graduated from college, and you take a step back if someone lost their job. And so I've been in that exercise a couple of times, and it really also made me realize all the advantages that I had being a middle class white male, and coming from a family of people who were educated, and really gave me a lot of advantages that I now recognize that a lot of the kids that I worked with over the years didn't have those things. And so I think part of this work is in recognizing our identity and how it informs and impacts us as educators. Is we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of our own privilege or lack, and how that influences our decisions as educators, but also those same privileges or lack, and how that impacts the needs and what our kids are bringing into classrooms with us.
Okay, thanks, Jason, for sharing that, and that really goes along with the definition of a courageous conversation from teaching tolerance. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here quickly. It's a conversation that explores the relationship between identity and power, that traces the structures that privilege some at the expense of others, that helps students think through the actions that they can take to create a more just and more equitable world. But I want to expand upon that, because I think there's an important piece that's missing there. You can be in, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this, you could also be privileged, but also be disadvantaged. And I'll give you one of the best examples that I have is that in the late 90s, I had the opportunity to work at the Ohio State University College of Nursing and Medicine. And one of my jobs was to really attract and retain more students that were different than the mainstream students in the College of Nursing and Medicine, particularly recruiting and retaining more inner city students of color and poor Appalachia white students. And I had the honor of doing that for 5 years. And we can say our white students may have had privilege of being white, but many of our white students came from households with incomes less than our inner city, and certainly less than many of the wealthy and certainly upper middle class minority students in nursing and in medicine. And so to me, that was an example of, yeah, they were privileged in some way, but also disadvantaged economically. And so I had to take that into account as we continue to recruit and retain students, and really to provide them mentors and other supports for them to be successful. Now, probably one of the greatest, achievements I've had, certainly at the secondary level, is that after we understood that concept of inequities, and that it impacts all of our students again, and all of our, it impacted all of our students in the College of Nursing and Medicine. We could then create a plan to support the needs of all of our students, regardless of their ethnicity. And so much so that we were able to have a 95% graduation rate and a 98% passage rate on the NCLEX exam. And later on, when I went over to medicine, we had a 98% acceptance rate in med school. So having to understand this power relationship and this privilege relationship impacts all of us was very important. I know there are some people who have put some items in the chat. Do you feel, are you okay in unmuting and maybe let's spending a couple minutes talking about your question you put in the chat or statement?
I see one there from Jocelyn. Jocelyn, did you want to go ahead?
Sure. I think, and people who know me know that I'm passionate about this. It's making sure that our students have voices, regardless of their background, or, like you were saying, you can be privileged, but also being considered different. And I think that often we take too many of our students' ability and their backgrounds for granted. If you have not experienced it, it's easy to dismiss it and look at the behavior of that student and the way that they react as being trouble, instead of really looking at why are they acting the way they act, and where is this anger coming from.
Very good.
All right, Dr. Tucker, there's a couple of comments in the soapbox that I'll go ahead and read just from the top. It is, let's see here. It is easy for me to assume that other people's lives and opportunities have been similar to mine. So that one is there as a comment. Another one is, I've witnessed many young people, even young children, who are highly traumatized, labeled as delinquent, and sent into the pipeline to juvenile detention, starting with an out-of-school suspension in elementary school.
Okay, so let's try to unpack those two questions or statements for a second. How can we begin to address the question about, or statement about, labeling a child because, or student because of that they were being delinquent, or we naturally assume that people are like us, they have the same values, the same customs, the same morals as we do. Yeah, what can we do to challenge that, to challenge our thinking? And before we do that, I want to say this. This is an extremely difficult conversation. And if this conversation is difficult for us here at KDE, it's certainly difficult for our colleagues in our buildings, in our schools. And we need to continue to get to a point where it's uncomfortable, being uncomfortable, because these are uncomfortable conversations. And I'll talk a little bit about this in my closing comments in terms of where do we go from here. But I don't want anyone to feel, it's okay to be uncomfortable, but I don't want anyone to feel like they're blamed, because once a person feels like they're the blame, or we can blame that person for having a certain privilege, they then shut down, and they are not part of the solution going forward. They're not part of this beloved educational community that we want to have for each one of our students here in the Commonwealth. So some suggestions in terms of how we can go about better understanding folks who come from backgrounds different than ours, whose privilege may be different than ours. Because as an African American male, I now share a privilege that many of our inner city and rural African American men don't have. And so my way of looking at the world is a little different. And I have a level of privilege that a lot of folks who look like me don't have. And I have to stop and look at that as well. So would anyone like to give some ideas, some suggestions in terms of how we can begin to unpack some of this?
So there is a comment in the soapbox that, and I think it's in relation to this discussion. The problem with soapbox is they don't come in at the exact same time, so I'm having a hard time. But a suggestion is by showing different cultures and languages to students, we can really open their eyes and broaden their awareness. Just things like taking Chinese in high school, have not stopped learning the language since. It's difficult to claim our privileges. Oh, it moved. Trying to see if there's anything else here. Oh, here it is. It's really difficult to claim our privileges. We have to take time and energy to connect this to our roles as educators and professionals. One of my first mentor teachers said that, quote, perspective is key and it affects everything.
Okay. All right, very good. Given I had 15 minutes to discuss this, I have a couple other things I certainly want to go through. And if you have any other ideas, please feel free to put those in the soapbox or just simply jump on and wave your hand and speak up. Someone just put something here, making a more concerted effort to get to know families and collaborating with the family structure. I certainly like that. So Tony, let's go on so that we can update our folks to let them know what we've done here in the last, some things we've done here in the last 4 weeks. So on November 10th, we asked our superintendents to participate in a statewide equity and inclusion scan. And there's a link to that scan. There's about 4 or 5 questions that we're asking all of our superintendents to respond to. I was scheduled on the 8th during the KSA meeting to give an update on their responses relative to equity and inclusion. That meeting has been postponed, and so when we do convene, I will give our folks an update on that. And in my conversation, you know, I mentioned our teacher advisory committee earlier. They have been sent the same set of questions, and we're going to meet here in next week after next. And so I'm going to share the results from that group of 20 or 25 teachers regarding equity and inclusion. And so here are some of the questions that I raised in the scan or been part of the conversations I've had with our fellow educators here. When you look at your buildings, what are some of the existing equitable practices with an emphasis on racial equity, inclusion, and diversity? What are some of the practices you're doing to make racial equity and inclusion and diversity a better experience for your students? And what do you have in place? As I said earlier, I just didn't want to assume that there are places here that really need extensive training, because we know training only lasts so far. Is it part of the work that they do? And does your district currently have an equity inclusion action plan? And folks, that's what I really believe is at the meat of this. When you go as far, when a school district in a school creates an action plan. And I've also asked them, are in your strategic plan, because you're now saying as a community that this is important. And we've also asked our folks to please share their strategic plans, and we're going to have that as part on our equity communication website, and we're going to make sure that that is available for all of our folks. And then the basic question is, what does equity mean to your school community? Does it mean giving everyone the same thing? Does it mean giving students and staff what they need? One school may need 10 counselors, another school may need 3. And in your governance model, it's always been equal. Then if that's the case, how do you reconcile that? And what academic gaps might exist between groups of students? And I know some of this data are on our report cards, but the question I've asked, have you had teams in your buildings? Have your PLCs taken a deep dive into the achievement gaps? And do they know the students behind those numbers? And equally important, if not more important, what academic achievement gaps exist in the social emotional development of different groups of students? What students have access to counseling services at home, at school? What groups of students are struggling more than others, especially again during this time of COVID? And the question I always ask and I always want our folks to know is that how can we assist our students, staff, and colleagues improve the social and emotional support that's happening in schools? And again, these are questions I've asked, and there are also things that I think that are important that we need to look at. And I'll ask you as another thing that I will ask of you during this short time I have with you, what other questions, what other supports should we provide to schools? Okay, next slide. So our end goal is to have our anti-bias, anti-racism training. And we know Dr. Cleveland has done a lot of work with us, and all the staff here at KDE is going to go through the training. And many of our school districts have, either a goal or they have actually started the training. But to me, what marks how effective that training is, are we identifying any specific problems? Are we incorporating any strategies, any proven strategies to address the structures that perpetuate bias in our school systems? I'll give you a good example here. When I was a superintendent in Ohio several years ago, we looked at the number of female students versus male students in AP courses. And at that time, the College Board, we were fortunate at that time that the College Board was providing scholarships and funding to school districts to increase the number of females in taking AP courses. And so we were lucky enough to apply for those funds. And we looked at the data. We know that we knew our female students were as bright, if not brighter, than our male students. And we knew they were working hard, but when our students, our female students got in 11th and 12th grade, and our students of color as well, they stopped taking the really high level science AP courses. So the question for us back in Worthington, Ohio, is that what was the district going to do about it? As superintendent, what was I going to do about it in working with the building principal? So we looked at the data, we had funding, we had district funding to address it, and we created a course. We created a course for our female students, and there were a couple male students in there as well, but targeting our female students to bring the balance of female students up to that of male students taking these science AP courses. In a matter of 4 years, the fourth year I left the district, we had more female students taking science courses than math. So we can marvel at the problem, we can admire the problem, but what are we going to do? And again, we can have all the training in the world, we can have all the tough conversations in the world. What are the outcomes? And I think we need to ensure that we create, as I mentioned earlier, certainly alluded to earlier, we have to have a comprehensive, well-funded, and shared diversity plan that goes beyond the one-shot PD and say, you know what, we're going to check the PD off. We've done it. We're now informed. We now can unpack our biases. It has to go beyond that, and it has to be shared. It really has to be shared. And I go back to the first thing I asked you all was, given our limited number of resources, how can we help our school districts? Because almost all of them are asking for help. When I hop off this call here at the end of the evening, I will be reaching out to a couple of our superintendents. They're asking for help. How can we provide the help and support that they need that goes beyond the professional development, particularly professional development that only a few school districts can afford? I think we need to ensure that we create some strategies in terms of what anti-bias or anti-racism looks like in the real world. And how do we create avenues for these to have these uncomfortable conversations? I will certainly say I wish we would have had a little bit more interaction right now, and it may be because some of us are uncomfortable talking about these things. But if we're really going to make some inroads and ensure that the next generation of students and the next generation of public school students are looking a lot different than they did 10, 15, 20 years ago. I think in 2016, for the first time, students of color outnumbered white students in public schools. And so what are we doing and how we're facilitating those tough conversations? And I really believe that those conversations are going to start with us. And I know it's tough, but we have very, very bright people here who can help facilitate those conversations and support school districts. Then also we need to connect our training and resources back to the schools or organizational strategic plan. Again, why I'm so excited by the Kentucky Boards of Education's resolution by our strategic plan that addresses diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we know in public education there are a lot of things that happen. What we do know, if we don't measure things, if we don't, they're not going to happen. If we don't value them, they're not going to happen. And so I'm glad to see issues along diversity, inclusion, and equity are being valued here. And I think the same thing should be true at our local school districts. Okay, next slide. Okay, any other thoughts and feedback? And this is not a sprint. This is new to us, and we're building this, and I want us to build this together. And there are folks across the country who are really looking at Kentucky, not just because of what has happened sadly to Breonna Taylor, but they're looking at the commitment that we've made here at KDE, that our Kentucky Board of Education has made as well. And again, in my conversations with these various groups, they want to know what's happening in Kentucky. And Tony, I see one other, something else in the soapbox, that we need to work with our local educators to equip and empower them to have these types of conversations. Anything else in the soapbox?
Yes, I'm just going back here, a couple more things. How would you like us to go about identifying problems and possible strategies with respect to KDE and our districts?
In having those conversations, I think sharing them. I mean, we have several opportunities for us to come together and share these. We're going to continue to push the conversations regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll also say again, it's a shared conversation, a shared conversation about having the discussion, a shared conversation about coming to some resolution, some type of support that we need. So again, let's work hard as we continue to get to know each other and build those types of relationships that we're comfortable bringing those things here to the forefront.
Okay. Great. All right, and I will make sure to send the soapbox to Dr. Tucker as well, and because there's a couple opportunities there for some feedback there as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, thanks, Thomas, for that. And I know you put a lot of time and thought into having that conversation with us, and it really is the beginning of what has to be a long-term engagement and a lot of work ahead. I wanted to just close up by thanking everyone for being on the conversation this afternoon. Hopefully, you were able to take something out of that will help you personally or professionally going forward. Also, welcome to all our new employees that have started up. We welcome you to the Kentucky Department of Education, and congratulations to our 3 award winners. We appreciate all of your efforts. Thanks also, Tony, for coordinating all this and running the PowerPoint and doing the all the steps that are necessary behind the scenes to make this happen. We appreciate you for that. Thanks, Robin, for presenting to us on the good news on the budget. We want to keep that good news going. I know Robin doesn't have any control over that, but we always appreciate when she brings us good news about budget matters. And thanks, Thomas, again, for coordinating all the work and conversation around equity and identity. When I started at the Kentucky Department of Education, I knew that the focus for at least the first several months was going to be heavy on COVID management, supporting districts, and it continues to be that even with the shifts that have happened this past week and even now, and we've got work to do around that. We also knew that we would be contending with possible significant budget shifts and what that would mean in both in the short term in this current budget year and next year, and we continue to be engaged in that. And because of the events from the summer and the board's resolution that really directed me to come into KDE with a focus on anti-racism and equity, we had a lot of work to do around that. So those 3 main focus areas or priorities remain so for us and will likely be focus areas for us for some time to come. But I'm also very excited about this coming conversation that I think once we round the new year, we start getting a better idea around vaccine timeline and we can start to put something tangible to a date when life as we know it as we knew it would return to normal, that we can start thinking about firmly when we will be past COVID and what that might look like. And the conversation that will happen over that period from starting in the spring throughout the summer and into the fall around the future of education in Kentucky and what our aspirations are, what education looks like going forward. I'm excited about getting to that conversation, but we've got to manage some really important and challenging matters in the short term ahead. With that, I'll bring this meeting to a close and give you all back a few minutes in your day to get ready between now and your next Zoom call. A couple of key dates to keep in mind coming up. We have a superintendent webcast coming up next week, December 1st. The Board of Education meets on December 2nd. And then we've got conversations with the commissioner coming up on the 9th. So still a couple of important things happening in December as we close in on the holidays. And we have another Team KDE virtual meeting on December 16th, really just as an opportunity to express our gratitude and appreciation for each other as we head into well-deserved time with family, hopefully over the holidays. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate you being on again, and we'll give you a few minutes back on your day to get ready for that next Teams or Zoom call. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.